Okay, you're too fucking stupid. All you know is your hamburger, and you're just defending eating hamburgers. That's all you're doing. You're so insecure. You're such a little tiny-minded person that all you're doing is scheming. How can I eat more hamburgers? I have to justify eating more hamburgers because I'm addicted to hamburgers. Okay, so I'll just cut your whole philosophy into some sort of anal turd, okay? It's just so fucking insulting. So shove that shit up your ass. I am so sick of this bull fucking shit. You can't make a rational argument. You can't explain how evolution isn't a Borg. You can't explain how your fucking imposition of suffering on individuals isn't an obscene fucking arrogance. You can't defend your fucking arrogance. So fuck you in the ass with this goddamn personal shit for brain. You're a fucking dumb, stupid turd and you can't defend it intellectually, so all you do is, as the cheap shotter does, you just keep fucking attacking the messenger, you fucking little weaselly cunt. It's a fallacy, your argument is fallacious, weak, you have a weak, limp argument, okay, and you're defending yourself as, oh no, I'm the strong Fakesagan. No, you're not, you're a weak fucking pussy.
I can't help but notice that you seem just a little bit perturbed, Gary. You know, the conventional wisdom when it comes to debates on the internet is that when one party loses their temper or begins making comparisons of the other party to Adolf Hitler, the debate is over. However, far be it from me to, in a troll-like fashion, simply dismiss this debate and declare victory because you're rage-quitting. I think that would be kind of a cheap cop-out if I were to do that. And after all, shouting and insults are kind of par for the course with you, and I really just gloss over that stuff. I consider that is your style, your argumentation style. And I'm less concerned with style than substance. So, you can call me a retard, a selfish, whatever the hell else you said, a hamburger eater. And that doesn't really bother me. However, you have begun introducing dishonest debate tactics, and that's a little bit more of a problem.
It always starts, this is the standard, is the fallacious straw man premise, and therefore the rest of the conversation becomes broken because there's a fallacious straw man premise that I'm supposed to have agreed with that I never agreed to.
A straw man fallacy. I don't know about that, Gary. Now, a straw man fallacy, for anybody who doesn't know, which I'm sure is nobody, is where you will create a weaker substitute for your opponent's argument and then refute that instead of refuting the actual argument. So, for example, an environmentalist argues for reducing carbon emissions, and then an auto industry expert refutes the environmentalist by saying, oh, well, this guy wants to restrict the right of free travel, and I don't agree with restricting the right of free travel. Well, that would be a straw man fallacy, because the environmentalists never argued for the reduction of the right of free travel. They merely argue for the reduction of carbon emissions. Now, you've accused me of employing a straw man fallacy against you, Gary, and if I understand correctly, what this seems to be in reference to is the description in my most recent video, which reads as follows. To the Ephelist, life itself is a Ponzi scheme, whereby the chumps who have already bought into it can only mitigate their losses by suckering new victims into the scheme through procreation. Gary, I think I've adequately distilled the essence of your philosophical position, and if you disagree, I'd like for you to explain in a clear and lucid way why you disagree. I've heard you say things in your videos such as procreation is an act of rape against the rights of the unborn, that it's a deprivation of rights to create a new life and bring a new sentient biological life form into an existence defined by suffering and pain. That is the crux of your philosophical position, Gary. How have I employed a straw man fallacy? In fact, if there's any fallacy going on here, I think it's an attempted goalpost move on your part. You know, I've made some very difficult to dismiss objections to antinatalism, and rather than dealing with those, you're trying to move the goalpost. You're trying to redefine your original position to evade the objections that I've raised to it.
So if you don't accept the premise that suffering is very different than comfort...
Gary, you already know that I don't accept that premise. Unless you really only did watch the first 3 minutes of my video, which I've noticed is the only part you responded to, even though I asked you a number of questions in my last video, and you haven't answered any of them. But I also spent a significant portion of the video talking about the nature of pleasure and pain and how they are subjective and interchangeable. So, yeah, your premise that there's a world of difference between suffering and pleasure is one that I roundly reject. I mean, you should know that. Allow me to go into a little bit further detail. The example that you've used to illustrate the difference between good and bad, pleasure and pain, is eating a cupcake or having a nail driven through one's eye. Obviously, eating the cupcake is good and it represents pleasure, whereas having the nail driven through one's eye is bad and it represents suffering and pain. However, there's nothing objectively good about eating a cupcake, and there's also nothing objectively bad about having a nail driven through one's eye. Value is created in the mind. It's created through our subjective experience of external stimuli. And it has everything to do with perception. Perception defines reality. You're actively creating reality moment to moment through your perceptions of the external world around you.
I'll just shit, and the shit will be washed downstream. I don't use the water that goes downstream. So there's absolutely no reason for me not to just shit in the stream and say, who cares? Doesn't bother me any. That's a future problem. No, that's illogical. I think it's illogical to anybody recognizes the future is going to likely exist, and it's completely dependent on what we have done.
Gary, I find it ironic that you accused me of employing a straw man fallacy against you when I didn't, whereas you are attempting to employ one against me by suggesting that I don't acknowledge that the future is going to take place, or that a new human life, which is created, is going to exist at some point in the future. That isn't my argument. My argument was that if parents can alleviate some of their suffering of their own existence and increase their own happiness and comfort by bringing in a new life into the world, by creating a child to make themselves happy, then don't the rights of the parents who actually exist and therefore are capable of having rights, don't those rights supersede the presumed anticipated rights of an entity which does not yet exist? Now, my argument is not that the child will not exist in the future. The child will exist in the future, but the child does not exist at present. So if we're going to weigh the rights of one person against the rights of another person, then my argument is that the rights of the person who exists are a little bit more important than the rights of the person who does not exist. Anyway, Gary, you know, this has been very illuminating for me, and I've really enjoyed this interaction, but if you'll pardon my saying so, it seems like you're running out of steam. So let me tell you what's going to happen next. If you want to continue this debate and keep it going, then I expect you to answer the questions I addressed to you in my last video entitled More Questions for Gary, parentheses, philosophical rather than personal. And it'll be very easy for you to identify those questions because they're always prefaced with a statement such as, here's a question for you. All right. Now, if you choose to do that, then we can continue having this debate. But if you choose not to do that and you just want to rage for the camera and insult me and employ some pretty devious logical fallacies of your own, then I'm afraid we've taken this as far as it can go, and I'm going to just have to go back to making my videos and you can go back to making yours. And if that does happen to be the outcome, then I just want to say that I've enjoyed this interaction quite a bit, that you're still a person who I have tremendous respect, admiration, and positive sentiment for. And, I think this has been mostly constructive.